The volcano Pinatubo mouse, which was thought to be extinct, has been rediscovered. In June 1991, Mount Pinatubo, which is a volcanic peak on the Philippine island of Luzon, literally blew its top during an eruption. It was the second most powerful volcanic eruption of the 20th century. It was considered to be 10 times stronger than that of Mount St. Helens, and its effects were even more devastating. Lava and ash spewed into the surrounding environment in the Zambales Mountains, pooling into layers up to 600 feet thick in the valleys. Following the eruption, powerful typhoons and monsoon rains triggered landslides and ash flows that continued for many months. 800 persons lost their lives, and the lush forests that had covered the mountain prior to the volcanic eruption were all destroyed or severely damaged. In recent years, however, scientists returned to the region to survey the surviving mammal populations, and in a new research paper, they announced that they have rediscovered a species of a mouse that had long been feared to be extinct. According to the researchers, when Pinatubo had the eruption, probably the last thing on anyone's mind was that a little species of mouse was thought to live only on that mountain and might well have become extinct as a result. What the researchers have learned so far is that although the mountain blew up, this new information is also a surprise. In early 2011 and in 2012, 20 years after that volcanic eruption on the island in Luzon, researchers went on to study the mammal fauna in the area. Over a period of several months, the team, which included local men from the Ayatiba tribe, surveyed the mammals on the mountain from the lower regions to the top regions, where the forest had been devastated by the eruption. Most of their research work was on Luzon and elsewhere in the Philippines, as this was the area that was most affected. They also stated that they went to other regions so that they could have a better understanding of the natural forested habitats where mammals are most common. They wanted to explore the opportunity to have an understanding of how mammals were surviving within that area on Mount Pinatubo. So far, there were no surveys of the mammals on Mount Pinatubo prior to the eruption. However, specimens housed in the U.S. National Museum of Natural History provided some records from lower elevations around the mountain. Most of the information provided by the museum indicates that the early records were for common species of bats collected in the 1950s. But one specimen was particularly intriguing. It was a specimen of a small rodent that became the type specimen. And it was the sole example of a new species described in 1962 as Apomys sacobianus, or the Pinatubo volcano mouse. The environmental conditions on Mount Pinatubo were extremely harsh, and the survey work by the research team was both hard, harsh, hazardous, and dangerous. Even after 2 decades, evidence of the eruption was seen everywhere. The landscape was very unstable due to the constantly eroding ash and lava deposits that made working in the steep terrain quite dangerous. It also greatly slowed down the process of plant succession. Vegetation was a sparse mix of native and non-native plants. Dense stands of grass, including bamboo shrubs, low-growing vines, and there were only a few trees. All of these plant species were characteristic of early-stage second-growth habitat. It was also quite different from the old-growth tropical forest that had covered the mountain prior to the eruption. According to the research work and field survey of small non-flying mammals elsewhere on Luzon, it has revealed that old-growth forests contain a greater variety of native species and few, if any, non-native pest species of rodents. But in a heavily disturbed second-growth habitat, specifically areas near croplands, the reverse is the case. Non-native rodents are most abundant, and there are only a few hardy native species. The research team thought that the work on Pinatubo could confirm this general pattern, so they expected to see few, if any, of the native species. The specific motivation for the Pinatubo survey and research was to discover the fate of the Apomys saccobianus, or the Pinatubo volcano mouse. After the eruption of Pinatubo, they looked for this mouse on other peaks in the Zambales Mountains, but they were unsuccessful to discover or locate an example of this animal. This would have suggested that a very limited geographic distribution existed for the species of mouse. They thought that the volcano might be the only place this mouse would have lived. And based on the expectations from the islands elsewhere at the time, it seemed possible that the species might have been lost because of the volcanic eruption. However, based on information coming in from the survey of Pinatubo, which was produced, some extremely surprising results. A total of 17 species were documented, including 8 bats, 7 rodents, 5 native and 2 non-native species, and even 2 large mammals, a wild pig and a deer. What differs from expectations is that non-native rodents were not all that common and were restricted to areas near Aita croplands, where such agricultural pests were often most abundant. Despite this new information that all areas which were surveyed supported sparse, scrubby second-growth vegetation rather than forest native rodents were abundant everywhere. Most surprising of all was that the most abundant species overwhelmingly was the volcano mouse. Far from being wiped out by the volcanic eruption, this species, the Apomys saccobianus, was thriving in this greatly disturbed landscape along with other native species that also had developed a new high tolerance for surviving in a disturbed environment. For some time, they knew that many of the small mammals of the Philippines can tolerate habitat disturbance, both natural and human-caused. But most of them are geographically widespread, not locally endemic species, which usually are viewed by conservation biologists as highly vulnerable. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Goodbye.